One day the last star will go out. Galaxies will unravel into faint, drifting threads. Black holes will evaporate into nothing, and space itself will stretch until the universe becomes an endless, ever-expanding void where nothing ever happens. Cold and empty, without life, purpose, or meaning. Pretty bleak, right? There might be a loophole in physics that lets a future civilization outlast the death of the cosmos to keep living, laughing, and trading internet arguments for Googles of years, maybe forever. I'll walk you through how that could work, step by step. So buckle up if you want consciousness to persist beyond the last light. How do you outlast the stars? Leap 100 trillion years forward to a moment when the last suns gutter and the universe slides into an all-dark stretch of forever. In that dim, stretching silence live the Noxans, the last civilization refusing to go quietly. To the Noxans, we look like cave dwellers. They've unraveled physics into tools and tricks we can barely imagine, yet they're still bound by the same cosmic rules as us. They love existing, and they refuse to wink out with the last stars. So they're putting a daring plan into motion, in effort to keep minds alive long after light and heat are gone, to preserve consciousness against the slow, cold dying of everything. The first problem is energy. A civilization needs power to keep running, paradoxically, not an enormous amount on cosmic scales. 5 hours of the sun's total output could run Earth's current civilization for roughly 10 billion years. The Noxans respond by harvesting the last stars. They build a colossal ring of batteries and collectors around their dying home star, a lattice of salvage tech and glowing capacitors clipped with small data spheres. That cache could sustain them for a few 100 trillion years. Enormous, but still finite. So they move to the hard part, changing the nature of life itself so consciousness can survive far beyond stored energy. Being alive means doing things, eating, playing games, and crucially, thinking. And every one of those things costs energy. But how much? A famous idea, we'll mercilessly simplify it as Dyson's cold thoughts, says that the colder you run a computer or a brain, the less energy each operation needs. Our brains operate at roughly 310 Kelvin, about 37 degrees Fahrenheit. And at that temperature, a simple 1-second thought, something like, I should wear a funny hat, uses on the order of 20 joules. If you could cool a brain down to say 155 Kelvin instead of 310, the energy required per thought would drop dramatically. And that change opens the door to stretching conscious experience far into the future. If you slow down the machinery of thought, you buy energy. Run your mind at half the temperature and each operation drags its feet. A 1-second thought at 310 K stretches to 2 seconds at 155 K, and the energy cost falls from about 20 joules to roughly 10. Push the thermostat down to 1/10 of our current temperature, and that same thought takes 10 seconds but needs only about 2 joules. That's the heart of Dyson's cold thoughts. Colder brains mean cheaper thoughts. And in principle, you can stretch finite energy into unbounded subjective time. The snag is biological. Freezing a living creature kills it. You can't just stick a flesh and blood mind in a deep freezer and expect consciousness to limp on. So the Noxans must take a far bolder step, transplanting mind into a cold, non-biological substrate that can run at near absolute temperatures. They must abandon biology and move their minds into machines. The Noxans transfer neural patterns into artificial brains, or better yet, convert themselves into pure virtual minds and spin up digital worlds as rich or richer than the one they left behind. It sounds like high fiction, And honestly, the how is uncertain. We don't yet know how to build such synthetic minds or computers that can host them. But that is the lead app the Noxans are gambling on to keep consciousness alive. 100 trillion years from now, the Noxans are running out of options. They've pushed technology to the limit, and the rules of physics still permit one last gamble. Around their dim star hangs a vast battery, enormous, gleaming, and utterly finite. Nearby, banks of artificial brains and a colossal, chillable computer crouch like sleeping beasts, ready to be slowed and economized. Desperation hums in the air. Lots of stored energy, lots of minds that can be cooled, and the slim hope that careful management will let consciousness endure far longer than the light that made it. How can a handful of batteries and a finite amount of power last forever? That's the Noxans' trick. Every time they lower the operating temperature of their minds and machines, the energy needed to maintain consciousness drops faster than subjective time stretches. Yes, cooler brains run slower, but the Noxans don't mind the slowness. They only care about experience, not clock time. So long as each cooling step reduces consumption quickly enough, the available energy per subjective second can actually grow in proportion to the drop in temperature, letting a finite reservoir fuel an unbounded inner life. The following panels show how they put that strategy into practice. A relentless, stepwise descent into ever colder states, each one squeezing more subjective hours from the same stored joules. When the last star gutters and the cosmos falls into a permanent night, the Noxans flit their batteries online and begin to chill their minds. Their method is almost brutally simple. Stop feeding a heat source and let it shed its warmth. Like unplugging a glowing bulb so it can radiate away its heat into the empty cold. The Noxans isolate and let their artificial neural cores dump energy to the void until they've cooled to whisper-slow speeds. They shut their minds down and slip into hibernation. Neural signals stop, thoughts vanish, dreams dry up, a complete, silent pause, while the machines that host them simply let heat bleed away. Their bodies become passive radiators. Frost rims the casings, faint thermal glows peel off into the dark, and unchecked, those cores cool a little more with every quiet second. When they wake again after a long sleep, everything is colder, and their thoughts crawl more slowly, which is precisely the point. Cooler brains burn less power, so each idea sips a tinier fraction of the battery. Their lives become a rhythm of sprawling cosmic days of awareness and long cosmic nights of hibernation. In those stretched days, they do all the things that matter to them. Meet friends, trade stories, savor virtual cheeseburgers, and spin up entire simulated universes, the amusements a far future Type 3 culture would call entertainment. The slowdown is no sacrifice, but the cost of turning finite joules into an unbounded inner time. At night they power down completely. No dreams, no flicker of thought, just absolute non-existence, while their machines lose heat and grow colder. They don't notice the absence. To a Noxan, being switched off is nothing at all. Early on, those cosmic nights are tiny blips compared with the vast days. A day might stretch for 1,000,000 years, while the following night lasts only hours. That imbalance arises because hot systems dump heat far faster than cold ones. Dropping from 300 to 299 takes far less time than cooling from 100 to 99. So each subsequent sleep must be longer to shave away ever smaller amounts of warmth. As their neural cores get colder, each shutdown must stretch farther to bleed away the ever smaller scraps of heat. Nights lengthen without limit, swallowing more and more objective time, so each waking interval can be preserved. The question becomes practical and philosophical at once. How far can they extend those nights, and in what sense does stretching sleep into the far future amount to living forever? How long could the Noxans actually do this? Dyson's idea of cold thought is so potent because it scales in a brutally steady way. As endless eons slip by, the Noxans simply nudge their neural hardware a touch colder, sleep through ever longer nights, then wake and live again. The staggering bit is how slowly temperature falls. After 100 trillion years of that rhythm, their cores have only cooled to about 230 degrees above absolute zero. A huge stretch of cosmic time for a comparatively modest drop in thermal energy. The trick is not instant miracles, but patient, repeating economy. The colder you get, the longer it takes to shave off the next fraction of warmth. Yet each shave buys you a vastly longer subjective tomorrow. A single thought now takes 1.3 seconds instead of 1.0. Each cosmic night has lengthened to about 400,000 years. Yet even after factoring in slower cognition and those immense hibernations, the Noxans' accumulated subjective time adds up to roughly 76 trillion years of experience, more than 5,000 times the current age of our universe. Small slowdowns and long sleeps, repeated without limit, have converted finite energy into an almost inconceivable span of inner life. It's a disturbingly intimate thought. If death is the final silence, what could be more terrifying than an unending present? We simply can't imagine how minds would cope with the literal opportunity to live forever. So step back and don't assume our instincts fit the future. Maybe the Noxans routinely scrub memories to keep novelty, or spin up whole new universes and populate them with fresh stories. Maybe after millennia, they choose to sleep and never wake again. Or perhaps they wire themselves to perpetual bliss, looping pleasure forever. Any of those futures, or ones we can't yet conceive, feel both wondrous and terrifying in equal measure. As eons slide by and the Noxans repeat their ritual of waking, living, and cooling, the cosmos itself succumbs to silence. Stars that once burned bright collapse into ghostly remnants. White dwarfs first stain yellow, then deepen to orange and red, and finally wink out to cold, black husks. Through quadrillions of years, the sky grows dimmer while the Noxans carry on, their cycles unfolding against a universe losing its light. Trillions upon trillions of years later, the galaxies unspool themselves like dandelion heads in an endless wind, spiral arms fraying, stars scattering into faint, diffuse ghosts until only the memory of structure remains. Far beyond that, in decillions upon decillions of years, even the universe's most voracious objects relent. Black holes, emptied by relentless evaporation, release their final photons in tiny, melancholy explosions, brief, cold fireworks that punctuate an ever-deepening night. They are still here. The Noxans cling to life at a staggering 10 quintillionths of a degree above absolute zero, where a single simple thought stretches out across a trillion years of external time. They spend 99.9997% of each cycle in hibernation, motionless and frozen, while the tiny moments of wakefulness flash by like blinks. To any outside observer, they move in unbearable slow motion. But inside a Noxan's mind, everything is unchanged, as fluid, vivid, and immediate as on their first day. The colder they grow, the slower their thoughts become, yet their inner lives remain as alive as ever. If everything around you slows by the same amount, nothing inside you seems altered. Conversations, thoughts, and wild adventures keep the same rhythm and color. Your inner life stretches in step with the world. For the Noxans, cosmic nights have become a quatordesillion years long, but that enormity means nothing to them. Those epochs are spent in unbroken hibernation, void of experience. Their present remains continuous and familiar, unchanged by a universe that has become an enormous, indifferent clockwork. No matter how vast the nights grow, they vanish in a heartbeat for the Noxans. Their inner lives remain perfectly smooth and continuous. Thoughts, words, and feeling flow as if nothing has stretched or slowed. The only change is that each sleep consumes a fraction less energy than the last, so their sparks burn ever more frugally across an endless, indifferent night. They have accumulated the weight of 4,000 trillion years of lived moments, sensations, and memories. Their power cell holds only a sliver of its original charge. Yet because each waking demands almost no energy, that sliver feels almost boundless. Their subjective time remains seamless and rich, each instant as vivid as any from their early days. It looks as if true eternity has only just begun. But perhaps that certainty is the last comforting illusion they still own. Can the Noxans truly live forever? Dyson's idea of cold thoughts comes down to a single question. Can you keep cooling without end, or will the cosmos impose a hard floor? There's a real snag. The universe's accelerated expansion, driven by dark energy, might set a lower temperature bound somewhere around 1/9,000th of a degree above absolute zero. If that floor exists, no amount of thrift or clever engineering will let the Noxans slip beneath it forever. They will reach that temperature floor after a Google years, 10 to the 100, and then cooling stops. Their reserves will begin to run down. After so vast a time, the cosmos may conspire in stranger ways. Quantum noise could scramble the delicate patterns of thought. Matter might collapse into inert iron, or proton decay might unmake atoms themselves. We don't know which of these ends will come first. Forever, it seems, is a precarious claim. Even if true, endless forever proves impossible. Dyson's cold thoughts would still buy unimaginable subjective time. Within the span of a Google years, their minds could feel like they've lived 2 trillion years. It sounds unreal, a fantasy of numbers. But physics doesn't obviously forbid life from learning to exist inside an almost dead cosmos. If so, consciousness wouldn't be a blink in cosmic history, but the universe's final deliberate act. Meaning, purpose, and hope distilled at the very end. Maybe that is forever.